We have a great speaker from Earlybird. By the way, just a quick note, Earlybird is an investor at Shapeshift. Maybe you heard about that company. And we have Ravi Kurani from Earlybird, and he is one of the blockchain investors there. So, round of applause for Ravi. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
I said everything right? Like you are an investor at Shapeshift,
yes.
And you are a blockchain investor there, and you are really into blockchain. And actually, after he gives his speech, then he's going to be joining a panel as well. So
exactly.
you're going to have a long time on stage today.
Yes, exactly.
So,
maybe I'll take one of those waters.
Thanks for coming. You came from
Munich.
Munich, sorry,
yeah.
Munich. So yeah, it's your turn now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Arda. Yeah, thanks for inviting me here. So I work for Earlybird Venture Capital. As Arda already mentioned, many of you may know our company. We have an office here in Istanbul, and we have 2 more offices in Germany where we were founded, in Berlin and in Munich, where I'm based. And Earlybird has been excited about blockchain technology for several years, and we started looking into the space and have been one of the first VC investors to invest in this space in Europe. I personally am very, very excited about the future because I think that blockchain will change our economy and the way we live in many, many ways. However, being a VC, I have to be optimist and realist at the same time. So that's why I basically want to talk about 2 things today. The first one is, what could a decentralized future look like? And the second one, equally important, what are challenges that have to be solved in order for us to get to a decentralized future, in order to get crypto and blockchain to mainstream adoption? And before I dive in, let me just quickly give you an overview of my own history and Earlybird's history in the blockchain space. So for me personally, it started in late 2013 when I bought my first Bitcoin. Basically, more as an experiment. I wanted to see what this was really all about. And then I forgot about it for quite a while. I bought it, I think, at a price of 400 euros at that time. I forgot about it for a while. I joined BCG, the consulting firm, and was working there for a couple of years, and didn't have much to do with it. In the meantime, in 2014, Earlybird did its first investment in this space in a company called BigchainDB. It was actually then called Ascribe, and later changed its business model to what it is today, which is a blockchain database company. I then joined Earlybird in 2016, about 2 years ago, and about 1 year ago, when, as you can see here, this is, by the way, the Bitcoin price. You can see here, just before the crypto ecosystem was about to take off, we invested in Shapeshift, a digital currency exchange, about a year ago in early 2017. All right, so let's dive in. And maybe just a quick recap about why actually do we think is blockchain such a big deal? And basically, the simple answer is because it brings our economy from this to this. So what does this mean? Basically, what you see on the left is a centralized network. And much of our internet economy has been built in centralized networks, like, for example, Facebook, Google, and Amazon. Some of the most successful companies over the past 2 decades that have also made VC investors a lot of money. But it comes with quite some disadvantages, and some of these and many of these can be solved by decentralized networks, which are which can be built based on blockchain technology. So decentralized networks allow for the same benefits. They bring users together, but without many of the drawbacks. For example, having high transaction costs, having a central point of failure, and blockchains, as we know, can almost not be tampered with. So as I said, I am highly excited about the future, and I want to show you what I think the future could look like, and some use cases that we see already today that I'm quite excited about. Obviously, the first one we all know, it's Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has basically the claim to reshape the financial industry, and I mean, there are many more coins today, but Bitcoin was really the first one, and it basically has the claim to make central banks obsolete, which is huge. But it's really about much more than just the financial system. How many of you do know what this is? Yeah, some of you know it. It's a CryptoKitty. This is a startup that got a lot of attention a couple of months ago, and basically what it is, it creates digital cats, really no joke, on the blockchain that are unique, that have a unique identity, and that can be bred, and where you can create your own CryptoKitty, and they are basically unique, and they're your own. And you will not believe it, some of the first and most rare CryptoKitties were sold for over $100,000. And you know, this probably started as an experiment or as a joke even, but the company has received funding from well-known VC investors such as Unisquare Ventures, and they believe that digital collectibles like the CryptoKitties are really a new vertical that we will see more in the future. And I think this is really something that none of us would have even imagined 2 or even 1 year ago. Another area I think that is extremely important is around governance. Blockchain will allow us to govern and vote in new ways, one of which is liquid democracy. Liquid democracy is a form of voting where I, as a person, can decide if I want to vote on a certain issue myself, or if I want to transfer my vote to someone else who maybe is more passionate about this topic or has a more informed opinion on this topic. So it will allow us to make better decisions even on a government and political system. This is not possible today because it's not possible to safely transfer such important things like votes, for example. These are just 3 examples, and I'm sure there are many, many more that we cannot even think about today, ways how blockchain will influence our life in the future. But let's take a look under the hood as well. How do we actually get there, and what will it take in order to build this colorful, decentralized economy? And in order to do this, I want to show you basically the framework or the mental map that we have of the decentralized ecosystem and the blockchain ecosystem. And the first part is basically the technology stack, and many of you will probably have seen this. There are 3 layers. The first one, the lowest one, is the protocol layer, which basically defines basic functionality, like, for example, the consensus mechanisms, how transactions are validated on the blockchain. Examples for this are the Bitcoin blockchain, the Ethereum blockchain, or also private blockchains like, for example, Corda. On top of this, you have the middleware layer, which are basically building blocks for decentralized applications, like, for example, development tools like Blockstack, or also like BigchainDB, a blockchain database company. And on top of this, the top layer, you have the application layer, which are then actual decentralized applications which will allow users to interact with each other. Again, and interestingly enough, Bitcoin at the same time is also an application because we use it to pay and transact. CryptoKitties is another one, and Shapeshift is another example. They are doing a great job in offering a very safe and very easy to use way to exchange digital currencies. So this is a pretty well-known framework, and on top of this, we think there are basically 3 more stakeholders in a wider sense that basically influence this market. And the first is the market and the users, so the end users of the applications. And I call it simultaneously the market because at the same time, the users are also able to invest in these projects and influence, of course, the price of the coins that are running this ecosystem. The second is the regulators. The financial regulators have taken a huge interest in controlling this technology and obviously protecting consumers. And the last one are the miners. that are providing the computing power in order to validate transactions on the blockchain. So this is how we look at this ecosystem, really. And what I want to show you now in the following, only very briefly, just because I don't have more time, is the challenges that I think the industry is facing that has to be solved in order to really get to mainstream adoption and to get to the decentralized future. And there are really 5 main challenges that I see at this point, and I will go through each of them after this. So they are basically scalability and efficiency, regulatory certainty, volatility, user interface and security, and token economics. And I will use this framework that I just showed you in order to show you which of these stakeholders are basically concerned with each of the challenges that I mentioned and how they can be solved, or which stakeholders can solve them. So let's look at the first one. Scalability is a huge problem because as of today, as you know, Bitcoin and Ethereum have rather a very, very low ability of transaction throughputs. There are other solutions that are faster already, like for example, Stellar or Ripple. But this is still an issue that needs to be solved in order to get to a magnitude, for example, like a modern payment network. There are other solutions that are being worked on as well, like for example, the Lightning Network, which went online on Bitcoin recently. And efficiency is another huge problem. As you know, today proof of work requires extreme amounts of energy that are being used right now, so it's really not a sustainable solution. Also here, there are already solutions that are being worked on, like for example, proof of stake. The second is regulatory certainty. As we've already heard before, and we'll also hear later, the regulators, like for example the SEC or also the FINMA in Switzerland, have released statements on how they are going to look at tokens, but it's really very vague still, and there have not been any precedents on how ICOs, for example, will be treated. And companies, until there is this regulatory certainty, companies will always face kind of the risk of doing something wrong. And in the end, regulation is a very good thing, that when it is in place, and when it is in place in a sensible way, it will provide a lot of security around how to basically build businesses in the future, which will be important to get to mainstream adoption. The third one is volatility, and this is an interesting one because I think volatility cannot really be solved by technology. It's really just a market issue. Again, here we have some companies that are trying to tackle this issue, like for example the several stablecoin projects that are proposing solutions on how we can solve this. But in the end, I think it will also just be a question of the maturity of the market in order to get to a more stable economy here. Obviously, in this state of time, we are still in a bubble. Prices are largely driven by speculation, and as long as this is the case, as long as there is so much uncertainty around what will my Bitcoin be worth tomorrow, again, we will not be able to get to mainstream adoption because people will just be afraid to hold their coins for a longer time, or it's just very, very, it requires a lot of attention really to this. Which also brings me to my next point, user interface and security. Today, it's still really, really cumbersome to buy coins, to participate in these projects. You have to deal with private and public keys. You have to be worried that you have to store your keys in the right way, or you have to give them to a custodian that can then be hacked. So there's really a lot of uncertainty and risk related to holding digital assets. The other is just, like I said, just use a user interface, so it has to be really, really easy to hold these tokens in order to really make it mainstream adoptable, as we have also seen with the internet before. And the last one I want to mention is token economics. Token economics is, in my opinion, is going to be really a new field of research or a new discipline really that will develop ways on how to incentivize users to participate in decentralized networks. as I've mentioned before, we have several stakeholders that will have to basically put in resources in the networks or provide resources in order to earn money. We will have the miners that have to provide computing power in order to secure the transactions. And all of these stakeholders in the decentralized networks and decentralized applications have to be coordinated in a way that there is incentive to build these networks. And this really depends on how the ICOs and how the token mechanics will be designed. And we are seeing, I'm working with several companies that are planning tokens or have released tokens already. And I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs that, have told me about potentially how to design a token and what are the challenges about this. And it's really, really not easy to kind of imagine what this network will look like in the future and how to incentivize all the different stakeholders in this way. So I think this is really also something that has to just evolve over time, where people will make experiences and mistakes and learn from each other how to best incentivize the stakeholders and the users of the networks, of the decentralized networks. So I think these are the 5 challenges that I see at this point, and each one of them is definitely being worked on already, but we still have quite a way to go. But I'm really, really optimistic that we will get there at a certain point. And we, of course, as a VC, are trying to do our part in order to get to mainstream adoption by providing, of course, capital, but also providing coaching, talking to startups, talking to regulators, in order to kind of get this whole thing off the ground. So just basically to wrap up, what will basically fuel the engine in order to stay with the car metaphor in the end? And I think there are a couple of things that we need in order to solve these challenges. The first is investment, and luckily that has already been solved in parts, because as we've just seen, ICO funding has exploded over the past year, which has just really brought a lot of money into this ecosystem, which of course will really accelerate the development. Of course, not all projects will succeed, but it's the same with as it has been with the dot-com bubble, where there was a lot of money in the ecosystem, and obviously this will fuel development. This also relates closely to the second point, because when there's money, then the talent is attracted to this ecosystem. And again, already here we see a lot of the smartest minds on the world are drawn to this ecosystem. Universities are starting to build courses and research institutes around this, which I think is a great development to see. But I think there can be done even more about this in order to attract the best people to this industry. The third one is dialogue and collaboration. If you look back, if you remember the different parts of the framework, you saw that in none of the challenges only one of the elements was read, but almost always 2 or 3 of them, which means to solve many of those challenges, it's necessary that several parts of the ecosystem work together, for example, regulators and the tech community, in order to create the best solutions. So I think open dialogue and collaboration is really, really key here to move this ecosystem forward. And luckily, I think we're already seeing this in parts when, blockchain consortia and industry networks are forming that are talking to regulators, that are trying to show the interests of the different parts and really bring them together. And the last thing that we need, I think, honestly, is just time. I think the best example of this, again, is the markets. We are going through the typical market phases of a bubble right now, and I think the only way that this will eventually settle and this whole ecosystem will evolve is really to just go through these phases, where right now we have this hype, there's a lot of money going into the industry, and eventually the good projects will separate from the bad projects, and kind of the dust will settle, and we will see clearer what this industry will look like, how tokens will be valued, and so on. So I think with everything, all the excitement that I have and that obviously also all of you have, we also, I think, have to just be patient and what's going to come next. So with that in mind, I'm at the end, and I would say let's start our engines, and I'm excited to move with all of you into a decentralized future and looking forward to chat afterwards. Thank you.